Now I get to go.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's a totally different story, and that's the beauty of it, right? So I grew up as a kid in a Christian home. Both my parents were believers. In fact, my granddad is a Baptist minister, or was a Baptist minister, and I was the kid that ran away from home and wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't have time for church people. I really couldn't stand church people. I thought that they were incredibly judgmental and fake. I didn't enjoy the surrounding anything with it. I mean, I remember I went to church camp one time because my parents made me go. I got my tooth busted open by a girl with a puka shell necklace, if you can believe it, back in the early 2000s.
Wow.
And that was my get out of free jail card for the rest of the time to ever go to anything church related, because remember when the puka shell broke my tooth? But for me, what happened was when I got to undergrad, sophomore year, first day of sophomore year, I get a headache. And that headache's not gonna go away for 5 years. I'm driving back to university, and I get this headache, and it's not gonna go. And then slowly I lose the ability to move my hands and my feet. I go down from 175, 180 pounds to 135 pounds. And I can't eat anything. I lose the ability to read. I lose basically everything. I have no stamina. I can't pay attention, eye floaters, ear ringing. At the end of it, I think I had 50 some symptoms. And I'm still in undergrad, and I'm trying to navigate a way and find a way through this. And I get misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis, and eventually, while I've dropped out of university twice, I've come back, and a really good friend of mine in my fraternity says, I've got this mentor through Campus Crusade for Christ. Why don't you go talk to him? So I go and talk to him, and I create a friendship with him, but he has been a missionary in Africa, and he actually had a parasite, and for 2 years they couldn't figure it out, so he always had bad intestinal things going on. And he goes, I know you've been to the Cleveland Clinic and University of Michigan, but go see this guy. So I go and see him, and I've got a stack of paperwork that's thick as encyclopedia, and I've been all these different places, and country doctor, and he hears my symptom list, and he starts to laugh. And I'm furious, Jared. Like, I'm gonna deck this guy. I might be 135 pounds, but like everything I got's going into this punch. And he's laughing, and he goes, I know what you have. He goes, you have Lyme disease. And I remember being completely floored by this, because I had been misdiagnosed with MS. There was lesions, there was demyelination. I was told I was never gonna get better, that things were only gonna get worse, that it was aggressive, that my life was basically ending. And sure enough, it's Lyme disease when we run the test properly. And that's something to talk about. If you ever have weird symptoms, get a PCR Lyme test. But went through and realized that I had this, but I was so far gone that normal take some antibiotics isn't gonna work anymore. My immune system's gone, my liver's gone, my kidneys are gone. I'd been suicidal, I'd been to all these really dark places. And without really knowing, the Lord was what was getting me through. He was getting me through this entire time. And I finally do get good treatment, and it takes about 8 years for me to truly start to get well, and had a brain scan done about 3 years ago, and lo and behold, there's no demyelination, there's no lesions, because I finally got proper treatment. But along the course, similar to you, of this illness, there were people and places every step of the way where the Lord grabbed me, and it was in the breaking, because I didn't realize how much pride I had. I didn't realize that I wasn't the master of my own destiny. And I remember one time, I was suicidal, and I thought about it, and I said, I'm gonna do carbon monoxide, and that way my mom gets an open casket funeral. I was in these really dark places, and there's always something that stopped me. And I remember one time I went to a headache clinic, and it was a guy who was the doctor that I'd played hockey with his son, and they came back and they gave me a script for, I think it was 8 pills, but they were gonna change my brain chemistry, and they were antidepressants, and there were all these different painkillers. And I was gonna have to be monitored for suicidal tendencies by everybody I know, because these are gonna change my brain chemistry, and I was gonna be in the dark. And I got home from this, and I'm with my mom, and I tell her all these things, and I'm just broken by this, because I had that will where I was saying, I'm gonna get through this, I'm gonna figure this out. And I remember her sitting there, and she goes, Cam, I don't know the solution, but it's not this. And we prayed in that moment, and it was the first time we got peace that this was going to be okay, that he had a way forward. And then during these really dark years, he takes step after step to make the connection and the connection and the connection I need for me to get well. And it was this huge health journey of him breaking me that led me to faith, and knowing that even as I'm well now, I need him in more ways than physical health. I need him in my spiritual health, because my spirit was broken. and my mental health, because I wasn't healthy mentally. And it was him that brought me through and knew exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. And talking about the years the locust destroyed, I mean, I went to grad school on a full ride because I went from not being able to read to being able to do things that way, because he had such provision and blessing and timing to break me, but break me gently enough. And I needed breaking, and then to repair and restore and lead me into a beautiful place. So the Lord was someone that was chasing me, who was always running and always had preconceived notions about Christians and what the church was. And he took that and broke that and then restored me ever so gently. And I'll tell you, about once a month now, I talk to someone with Lyme disease. I talk to someone that's broken, and I can come alongside them and say, you want to know what? There's hope even in illness. And even people with some illnesses that don't get better. I know people that haven't gotten better. I know people that have lost their lives, and I know people that are in the struggle of it. And to know that he is still there for them too. And even if things don't get better, there's still illness in my family, that he is still a good, loving, and perfect God who can be trusted and does bring beauty out of ashes. And that's been the testimony that he's had for me for the last, 12 years of a breaking and a restoring and never letting me go.
Yeah. And I mean, from that time of mental and physical, just not being able to do anything, to the restoration that's now made you a blessing in so many guys' lives. I mean, every time I see you, there's just new people on the pickleball court. You're now like one of the team leads in the kids ministry. I mean, you're just killing it, right? And I mean, I think that like it takes that God restoration that puts us on fire for him. And I've seen it in you. And I remember at my wedding, we went around the room with all the groomsmen and said, hey, what's your one piece of marriage advice, right? And it was funny because everybody said something great, and we had pastors in the wedding, everything, right? Everybody said something great. But your thing really stuck with me more than anything. And I remember talking to my wife, Marilyn, about it afterwards, which was, hey, allow the marriage to be like something that you take and you continue to minister and use it for that sanctification, and then continue to glorify God through it. And Marilyn and I had all these conversations leading up to the wedding, like, we're going to have to step out of this and we can't do this anymore and all this other stuff, And I remember that was like the most memorable thing, because it's like, wait a second, like God has blessed me, been in God's favor, greatest worldly blessing I've ever received. And, it's still time to serve him and glorify him. And so that was just so impactful of what you said. And I know you say that those type of things with so many guys. And so when Mark and I were talking about starting the podcast, it was like immediately I was like, I'm talking to Cam. See if he wants to do it.
Well, I'm glad it was the single guy's advice that stuck with you for marriage. But I think that is the testament too. Like, you and Marilyn do have an amazing marriage because it's Christ-centered for the kingdom. And I think one of the things that we take from Disciple, and as we've had these podcasts and we've talked about topics, is the idea that it's not about us. Like, you as an individual, as you get closer to Jesus, it's less about you. And as it's less about you, you find more joy, more fulfillment. And we talk about the restoration he did in your life and the restoration he did in my life. And it was for us because it was about other people, right? Like, my restoration was so that I could go and be a part of the kingdom. Your restoration was so you could go and be a part of the kingdom. And I think there's just such beauty in the paradox of the kingdom of God. And I thank you for telling me that. That actually pumps me up. I appreciate that the Lord gave you a word from what I said. That's really cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you like that video, you can watch another one right here. And if you want to see the full podcast, you can click right here. And as always, 25% of all proceeds go to missions, and you can always check us out, disciples.us.